Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the media for joining us this afternoon. Over the past few weeks, I would have addressed you in my capacity as acting Prime Minister, while Prime Minister Motley took some time to recover. And I, like you, this afternoon, I'm very pleased to know that she is back with us and firing from all cylinders, fully recovered, and looking forward to her being able to resume full duties and to give the guidance and the direction that is necessary to this country at this time, and certainly to the wider Caribbean. This afternoon, I wanted to take the opportunity to speak to a number of concerns that I believe have been expressed by members of the public, members of the various parents, students as well, as it relates to things like the Common Entrance Exam, the CXC examinations, the reopening of schools, access to devices, and generally the future of education coming out of the COVID-19 environment. But before I touch on those matters, I want to just take us back a little bit as to how we have gotten to this point. You may recall that after the announcement of the first two cases of COVID-19 in Barbados, government took a decision to close schools on the 18th of March in order to bring the term 2 to an abrupt end. As it became clearer to us that COVID-19 was here to stay, and it was here to stay for some time, and that we would therefore see a disruption in the face-to-face interventions between students and teachers in the upcoming term, we took the decision to move to what we've described as emergency remote teaching. We had started the process of training and retraining our teachers, which are over 3,500 in the system, and we did so with the platform G Suite for Education. We also set up the email accounts for all of our students in anticipation of having to go to this particular type of environment. Many of our teachers and our information technology coordinators would have worked through the last week of term, the Easter vacation, and the first 2 weeks prior to the official start of the term. Many of them had to grapple with the transition from face-to-face interaction with students to now online teaching and learning. And I want to say a special thank you to all of our teachers, our ITC coordinators, the ministry staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to be able to equip not only themselves but also to assist many of our students in the system, as well as the many parents who have also now been confronted with the emergency remote teaching platform. We agreed at the time that we would not be teaching any new subjects in Term 3, not adding anything new to the burden of the teachers, or ensuring that students who may not have devices at the time would basically not be disadvantaged in any way. And so we asked all teachers to go back to teaching anything that they would have taught in Terms 1 and 2 to basically reinforce a number of the concepts that students would have been taught in those terms. Also, at the end of Term 2, we took a decision that we wanted to prepare for what would be the emergency remote teaching platform. And we invited a number of principals to get into contact with parents and to find out from them whether or not the students had devices, whether they had Wi-Fi connectivity, or even whether they had electricity in the households. Many of our principals work with teachers across the system to be able to gather that information. And throughout the Easter vacation, a lot of the data had been compiled for us in the ministry to be able to have a better assessment of how many students were without devices. Let me just say that the inability to contact parents generally is always a problem for the Ministry of Education. And at this point, it has been no different in that there are many parents sometimes who have provided contact information to the schools, but then because they change cell phones, they are often not updating the information at the schools. And I would want to urge parents that if it is that you've changed your devices, your contact numbers, wherever possible, please alert the principal of the school, the administration of the school, as to any change in information, so that the principals and certainly the Ministry of Education can be able to contact you at any point in time. Even if you don't have a personal number, I think it would be prudent to just allow a number for a neighbor or a family member as a secondary contact so that we can get in contact with you. And we have been trying to reach as many parents as possible. We've also provided the contact information for parents to be able to reach out to the ministry. And those numbers that we initially started with, it was around 4,000 when we started. I had anticipated we would need about 10,000 devices in total as persons were able to be contacted. And we are right now close to about 6,500 students that we have identified in the system that are requiring a device. We had said from the outset that we understood the concerns of many in Barbados as it related to the issue of households not having electricity. We understood the issues of Wi-Fi connectivity, and we also understood students may not have access to devices, or they may have access to devices, but they may have to share those devices with other students and other family members in the household. We said at the time that we would utilize the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, and we embarked on a program with the assistance of private sector entities as well as the Media Resource Department to be able to catalog a number of the programs and the content that would normally be used in school, and we wanted to be able to transport that content into a format that could also be shown on CBC. And we've started that process. I believe there's some of the videos are already airing on Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. But we wanted to go a step further because we recognize that regardless of whatever happens with respect to COVID, the ability to have an educational channel dedicated to the Ministry of Education and even the Ministry of Culture was something that for the future after COVID was something definitely that we needed to start working on. And so we've started to look at the possibilities of having our own television station. We've also been embarking with several teachers on working with the ministry to create the content that is necessary now to transition from the classroom teaching into an online environment. And all of the producers have been working with them to be able to help them to make that transition. And again, too, I want to say thank you to those teachers who have been creative. Many of them have come forward with ideas, and they've worked with our department in Media Resource in order to be able to provide much needed content. So coming out of this process, I anticipate as well that we will see a change in the content, the way in which we present the content, but also we will see a different engagement from all of the stakeholders as it relates to the type of content that is used in the schools by our students. I made the plea a few weeks ago as well when we realized that there was a shortage of devices to be able to invite corporate Barbados to come on board and individuals, and I really am sincerely grateful to all of the donors that have come forward to assist us at this point in time. We've had some great donors over the course of the last year coming forward and assisting us with renovations to the school plants and making donations in different forms to the various schools. But in this plea that we made to the private sector and to overall Barbados, we have seen not just local persons coming on board and local companies, but we've also seen persons in the diaspora as well coming forward, members of various trusts also coming forward to be able to offer support by way of the purchase of devices. The entire world. And that challenge is that just like we have shortages of masks and we have shortages of ventilators and swabs from time to time over the course of the past few weeks, we also have a situation where everyone is trying to move to emergency remote teaching in some form, and as a consequence, even though the donors have committed in a lot of cases to providing us with the devices, they too are trying to access and to source those devices from all over the world. We have, with the kind assistance of the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, also been able to have the assurance that any shortfall in the donations, the Government of Barbados will definitely seek to provide us with the shortfall to ensure that students are not without the devices during this period. And I just want to say that, regrettably, none of us had the time to plan and to put in place the various mechanisms to either collect the data or ensure that we were able to source these devices ahead of time. The good thing, however, is that government as well as private sector and individuals have made a commitment to ensure that no child is left behind. And so in determining our priorities with respect to which students will have access to the devices as they come available to us, we have said that the students who are preparing for 11 plus examination, those who are doing other exams for CXC, that they will have first priority on the devices as they come to hand. And I can tell you that we have already started distribution at the ministry. We have been contacting the parents and having them come to the Ministry of Education to be able to sign off an agreement which we've put in place, which places some responsibilities not only on the parents, but also on the students to basically take care of the devices, and also to make them aware that there are consequences for damaging or destroying those devices as well. I know that there are many donors who have been keen to jump on the opportunity to be able to provide us with devices and to provide students with devices. And while we welcome all of the interested parties, I would ask at this time that the will to donate to students should be against a background where the Ministry of Education obviously has a protocol in place with respect to these devices. And we would urge persons to certainly contact the ministry. Let us know what you want to do. Let us know where you may want the donations to go, and also to obtain information about the specifications for the devices. Because we want to make sure that the devices that we use are devices that the students can be able to obtain and to use beyond COVID-19. And so we have some very strict technical requirements in terms of the types of devices. Granted, there are persons who have been able to acquire devices that were available at the time, and we appreciate those as well. But what we don't want is a situation where there's a duplication of the requests, where some persons already have their name in the ministry and then they've received a device from a donor, and then we have a child that may have wanted a device, then not being able to have access to that particular device. So we really urge you all at this time to really contact the ministry. I mean, we are also working on ensuring that the devices have security codes. They are being updated in terms of all of the security, so that if they're lost, that we are able to trace the devices. And we just want to make sure that all proper mechanisms are in place for students to be able to appreciate the donations that have been given. Over the past few weeks, we have had lots of concerns. Persons have been asking what is happening in respect of the common entrance exam. There have been concerns across the board from parents, from teachers, from students, and obviously the unions. We've met with the union representatives, the NUPW, the Barbados Union of Teachers, the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, and we've established a number of subcommittees through which we've broken down a number of concerns that would have been expressed. And we've started and continued rather discourse on a number of areas that are of concern to various stakeholders. The thing is, we may not always agree on everything, but I think the one thing that we do agree on is that we are working together in the interest of the children of Barbados and to ensure that there is no child that is left behind in this process. With respect to the Barbados Secondary Schools entrance examination, or the common entrance examination, which was originally scheduled for the 5th of May, and then it was later postponed as a result of COVID-19 and the uncertainty that has surrounded it. After consultation with the various stakeholders and listening to several parents who are anxious as well to put this examination behind them, we have settled on a date of July the 14th for the new date for the common entrance examination. In preparation for the exam, while we have prioritized the devices to class 4 students so that they can continue to maintain their contact with their teachers, we also recognize that there are some students for whom having the face-to-face contact prior to the examination, especially after such a prolonged absence, would certainly be beneficial to them. And as such, we propose to integrate all class 4 students only into primary schools from the 15th of June, giving teachers 4 weeks contact time with students in order to prepare them for the examination. With the assistance of protocols that have been put in place for the reopening of schools in a phased way by the World Health Organization and the Pan American Health Organization, we have spoken to our public health officials, we have started discussions with the respective unions, and we have come to some consensus in terms of the way forward as it relates to a set of protocols which will guide the return to school for both our teachers as well as our students at the class 4 level. It is our intention to make sure that school is not just a safe school, but it's a safe school for our teachers and also for our students as well. In the interim, we have started to look at addressing the issues of sanitization. We've looked at ensuring that the plant is obviously properly maintained as students will be returning and teachers will be returning to the school plant. We have had preliminary discussions with UNICEF, and there's some commitments there in terms of helping us as a country to be able to allow the phased reopening in this way of our schools. And that will include the provision of masks, both for our teachers as well as for students. It will also require the provision of sanitizing materials as well. And obviously we will make sure that we have the proper markings in place to ensure physical distancing in the classrooms. Obviously, as you can appreciate, the classrooms would traditionally hold a full class, and therefore there will be some accommodation made school by school to ensure that we are able to respect the 6 feet distancing. Over the course of the next few days as well, we will start to roll out, for the benefit of students and parents, a number of PSAs that will inform them as to what to expect when they return to school. So while we plan as well for the actual day of the examination with a set of protocols being put in place, we are equally looking at the protocols that will be necessary to govern the return to school of the Class 4 students into their respective environments. I am pleased that the unions have been cooperating in the way that they have with us as it relates to rolling out these protocols, and that we've had all the inputs of the various parties. I think that what has helped to guide the process is the fact that as we enter this new phase of the current directive, we have seen the private sector come forward as well and share their input as it relates to various protocols in the respective sectors. And I think that that has also provided some impetus as well for the respective unions and all the stakeholders to be able to help to input into how we can return to school in as safe a manner as possible. I think the over 3,300 students that will be sitting this examination will be overjoyed to know this afternoon that the examination date has been set. I think their parents will also be excited to know that the date that they have been no doubt paying for lessons for the last 2 years or so to prepare them for, that date has now been set as well. And also that teachers who have been working tirelessly with extra lessons and in the classroom environment to ready students to be able to take this examination, that there's now some certainty with respect to the actual date. I think many of you would be aware that in coming to this decision, it has not been an easy one. We really didn't want to set a date ahead of us being able to have a good grasp as a country as it relates to COVID-19 and the cases that have presented themselves. But I think we all accept that as we start to reopen the various sectors, that in particular we have to simply put protocols in place and make sure that those protocols are followed if we are to be able to reopen schools in any phased way. And let me just tell you that in other jurisdictions, England for instance, they have taken the approach of reopening the entire primary school, and that has caused some concern. Because I think the concern always is that the smallest children sometimes may be more difficult to contain in a school environment. But we have taken the approach that we will certainly look at our class 4s, given that this examination is something they've been preparing for, and we will focus on them first of all. In addition to the class 4 students, there are also students who, because of the abrupt end to the last semester, would have been preparing for their CSEC and CAPE SBAs. And we recognize that because the term would have ended in that way, that many of them were either unable to complete, or they had not actually been able to submit their assignments. They were at various stages of completion of the SBAs. So we've determined that we will allow those students as well to be able to return to school, to be able to complete their SBAs, and that will also be followed with the appropriate protocols for the moderation of those examinations, as well as for the physical distancing and all of the other requirements that will need to be put in place. And we're grateful to CXC as well for working with us, as well as the health officials, to be able to ensure that students can return in a safe environment and have some degree of certainty as it relates to the examination. I have also had a lot of concerns as it relates to when will the school term end. The Trinity term we would have announced beginning on the 4th of May. Several persons have been asking about the official date. I don't want to rush the term, but just to say that had we not been in this environment, the Trinity term would normally run for approximately 12 weeks. It would have started on the 14th of April if all things had gone according to plan, and it would have ended on the 3rd of July. Then students would have been able to engage in the summer vacation. If we apply the same 12-week period to the start date of the start of this Trinity term, then the official end of the term would actually bring us somewhere around the 24th of July. Now, there have been several suggestions that we should terminate the term. We should have a 7-week term. We should end it at 10 weeks. And we are all considering in the ministry all of the options that have been put on the table. As I said to the unions yesterday, it is easier for us to shorten a term than it is to try to add on a piece at the end. And I would like to let you know as well that prior to the end of the last term, discussions had started with the National Cultural Foundation and the Ministry of Education with respect to looking at that last few weeks of the term where teachers were obviously correcting papers, preparing themselves to get the reports out for students, and the syllabus had pretty much come to an end. And in some cases, we have students who tend not to go to school at the end of term, or they get up to mischief. And so we were looking at a partnership with the Ministry of Culture, whereby we would use a number of their resources, human resources, to be able to go into the school to work with students on what we consider to be enriching them in terms of their national consciousness. Now, while we cannot physically go into the school environment, one of the proposals that is on the table that we're working on is being able to look at the latter part of the term as a period as well where we can have some of those enrichment activities for students to engage in online. I think many of you may have seen I've joined the classrooms, and many of the staff here have joined the classrooms virtually. We've been able to engage with students in a way that would normally require lots of scheduling to be able to make sure that we can go into the classroom. And this virtual environment has allowed us to come into the classroom and talk to students. And I do feel that it lends itself to further opportunities for whether it's our artists or musicians or bankers, entrepreneurs, to be able to take advantage of that latter part of the term when not much sometimes is happening, for teachers to be able to schedule specific sessions with the students where they would still be in formal structure of education, but they would be learning a few other things about etiquette and banking and those types of things, and preparing them whether for secondary school or in some cases for adulthood as well. And so we are in discussions with the unions as well as it relates to how we address the end of term and whether we should shorten, and in the fullness of time we will come back to the country and advise. But as it stands right now, the term remains a 12-week term, and we will come back in relation to the further details on that. Now, I can also report to you that the Blackman and Gollop School, which was used as one of the facilities by the Ministry of Health and Wellness, to assist with the period of COVID, will also go back over to the Ministry of Education, and I believe the process has started for the appropriate removal of the equipment and also for the appropriate sanitization of the facility to take place over the course of the next couple of days, and that would also allow for the re-entry to the facility by students in another few weeks as well. I want to thank the parents and the staff and the students as well at the Blackman and Gollop School. I know it could not have been an easy journey knowing that your school was being used in this way by public health, but I am comfortable and satisfied that we did the right thing at the time, and it was a facility that is perhaps one of the better facilities that was available at the time to the Ministry of Health and Wellness in terms of its location, in terms of being equipped to be able to deal with things like that in a public health emergency. And there really has been, or there will be a smooth transition in terms of the hand back over to the Ministry of Education so that we can resume normal operations as it relates to education. I want to say finally that we are not quite out of the woods in terms of where we are as a country, and I would want that persons are not complacent in the approach to dealing with their health. We still have to pay attention to all of the protocols that have been put in place and to do things safely. And obviously schools are no different, but it really is going to require all parties to get on board in order to make sure that we are able to go about our business safely in terms of public transportation for students getting to school, but also ensuring that the school environment is safe and that people respect the protocols that have been obviously put in place to protect them as well. So again, I want to thank all of the ministry officials, the staff that have of the respective schools, the principals, the respective unions, the parents as well, and the students for being exceptionally patient and willing to try something different in a very difficult time. That is really, for all of us, a step into the unknown. But I believe that we have shown as a people that we're able to withstand, and we have a great level of resilience to withstanding any troubles that we may encounter. And I'm just grateful to all for being patient with us as we try to roll out not just the device program, but as we start to reorient our students at the class 4 level and those who are doing the SBAs into the school system to be able to continue their education at this point in time. If there are any questions, open to questions at this point in time.
Mr. Bradshaw.
Yes, please.
Shane Jones, CBC News. I'm sure parents have been listening to this live. One of the first things they'll be asking when they hear about the phased reopening for the class 4 students in June is the safety for the health of their children. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a look at what those classrooms would look like? Mm-hmm. How many children would be in a classroom? The social distancing protocols? What would the classroom look like?
Well, I don't want to speak before the protocols are final. We've shared the protocols, the draft protocols that we would have received from the agencies, the international agencies, with all of the various stakeholders. We did an internal draft, which we've also shared with the Ministry of Health and Wellness for their input. But in our early discussions, we've looked at obviously the 6 feet of distancing. There are some classrooms, as you might appreciate, at the primary schools, for instance, that have a number of dividers. They're long rooms and they have a number of dividers. And in many instances, we may still be able to have the classrooms conducted for the class 4s by opening up those dividers and being able to have safe distancing of the students in the classroom. Where we have to look at the examination, for instance, we're in discussions as to whether that will take place at secondary schools or primary schools or a combination of both. As you can appreciate, we have the CXC examinations, which will be taking place in some of the secondary school institutions, and therefore we will work through with CXC, who is still to give us the final dates, because there will be some revisions to the schedule, and we will basically be coordinating where we place the students for the purpose of the examinations as well. Will it be
business as usual in the sense that secondary schools will be utilized, or will you be utilizing, say, gymnasium or some other?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. All options are on the table at this point in time. Again, I mean, we've always done our examinations for common entrance at the secondary schools. The secondary schools are willing to facilitate the entry of students there for the common entrance. If it's not broke, I don't see why we have to change it. But equally, we recognize that we may, because of the physical distancing protocols, have to utilize other locations. And the good thing about education in this ministry is that we have responsibility for all the schools, so we have a number of places we can choose from as well. The other thing is there are not any activities really going on at the gymnasium or LESC or anywhere else. So if we do have to utilize other facilities owned by government, it's not a problem.
E-learning has been a major challenge, or has been a major topic
The thing with technology is that you always have to keep training. So there's no situation where you can say you have trained and you don't have to go back to training. Every day I find something else on my iPad that I have to go back and learn and refresh my memory in terms of a particular app. We have done the initial training with the teachers in the system. We had a meeting yesterday with the ITC coordinators because I tried to bring all of them together on a Google Teams meeting to be able to talk to them, because I feel that they're at the driving force of the technological changes, and therefore we need to hear from them what are some of the challenges. And I think that one of the concerns some of them expressed was that the teachers have asked for more training because you're moving from the physical text and you're moving into creating all of that content into an online environment. So there are some refresher programs we will have to do over the course of the next couple of weeks. But for the most part, I think teachers have risen to the occasion. It's not without the concerns and the complaints. But I think for the most part, we've seen some teachers really push ahead to try to overcome the challenges that have presented them. We've had teachers actually create animation content and multimedia content in this environment as well, because they understand that children learn differently now, and they have to make things and create things that are going to capture the children's imagination. And so many of them have worked with MRD, they've worked with the external team to really try to find a way to bring their content to life and to keep the attention of the children in the classroom.
Another one from you, Ms. Bradshaw. What about transportation for those students? Because we know we've been having some issues with the buses and not adhering to the 60%. So
Yes.
a lot of students know we'll be back on the bus.
Prime Minister Motley would have indicated at the meeting 2 days ago that we have also engaged discussions with the private sector. I think Ross University, as you know, is not an island, and we worked with them to have a co-op forum to be able to supply transportation. As I was coming here, I heard from the chairman of the Transport Board, who indicated that they have been able to get the buy-in from a number of the operators. And so in addition to providing obviously services for the existing fleet of persons who would require transport going to work, obviously we'll be able to add that as well to assist us. And I believe the additional buses that government has ordered will be coming, I think the Prime Minister said, at the end of June as well. So we are not where we would like to be, but I think we are almost where we need to be at this point in time. And I'm glad that people are just recognizing their challenges and working with us to try to iron out the kinks. It's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination.
We've also heard about some content on G Suite that might not or shouldn't be there. Is that a real issue and is it being addressed?
I'm not aware of what would be the specific content.
I've heard about porn.
Well, I think we would not have put on the porn on the G Suite platform. I think you have to accept as a society, first of all, that pornography is out there, and it didn't take being in a virtual classroom for students to discover pornography. We've all been in school, and we all know that pornography existed in some form or fashion. What I've said to the ITCs and certainly to the unions and stuff is that we have, and to the team in the ministry, is that we have a responsibility to make sure as far as possible that we educate parents about the dangers. We also have to educate them about the ways in which to block the sites. Because while we are trying to access software to be able to do it from the ministry's end, we have been able to do it when students are in school, but we have no control necessarily over the household. We're working on trying to be able to do that, especially now that we've had to transition in this way. But for the most part, we have no control over the household, and we would want parents to be sensitized because they have now become digital parents, and we need them to be sensitized about the new direction and the access to this type of material, so that the students aren't just with a device and they're not paying attention to what they're doing. So I think, while we can cover and we can try to do certain things, parents also have a responsibility to have some level of oversight over what their children are doing in the classroom.
Will the 9 to 3 timeline still be in place?
Right, we've looked at it's 9 to 1:15. Yeah, 9 to 1:15 with a break as well as a lunch period, and school meals will be provided for those students as well. But as I said, we're trying to finalize the times, but I believe the recommendations from the subcommittee had placed us at 9 with a break around 10:15, 10:30, and then with students then having lunch at the school, or we can do the packed lunches and they can take them and go. But again, physical distancing protocols will be in place for the canteen areas and the serving areas as well.
And to touch back on the learning part, do you know what the attendance rate has been since the learning process started?
It's been challenging to give a definitive, and I'll tell you why. We have figures that show students have logged on, and those figures show at least about an 80%, I think, attendance in terms of, if we call that attendance, 80% of students or so have logged on at some point in time. The challenge we've had is that students may not be maybe sharing devices as well, so we're not sure if they're sharing a device with a neighbor or a friend in the neighborhood, and therefore the numbers may actually be higher than that. We're also mindful that some of the students didn't have devices, so that may also account for the reason why we might not have 100% attendance. We've put our officers in the ministry who would normally deal with attendance as well. Once the information comes in from the teachers indicating whether students have been in the class, they're able to investigate to find out whether it's as a result of a device, whether it's truancy, whether the children are ill. And so our officers have started that process to try to understand exactly what are the factors that are preventing children from logging on. We've also said to teachers that, this is also the time where they can also weigh in, because if they realize that they've taken attendance and students are not attending, and they've taken the register, then they need to alert us if there's a pattern as well. So it's a different way in which to capture information. The open EMIS system, which we use in schools, would normally mark attendance in the morning and it would mark attendance in the afternoon. Since we've moved to 3 hours of the face-to-face time, it means that each teacher has to log the attendance, and then that information has to be sent back through the principals to the Ministry of Education. So it's a different process. Obviously, we wouldn't have had a system set up to log attendance in every single class, but we are still monitoring to see how do we respond in this environment to students who may not be able to be online at this point in time. Okay. All right, thank you. And if there are no more questions, thank you all. And sorry to break you on your Saturday, but thanks so much. Cool. Thanks, guys.